In the last video, you learned how to use the require function to load in a node module. In this video, you're going to learn how to use the require function to load in another file you've created. So right now, the only file that's ever going to execute is app.js, because that's what we passed to the node command. That means we're going to have to put everything in this file if we want it to run, and that's not ideal. As our applications get larger and more complex, we're going to have way more code than we would want to have in a single file. When all of our code sits in one file, it makes the project really hard to expand on and maintain. So from the start, we're going to go ahead and create projects that use multiple files so we can stay organized. We can do something like define a function in one file, then require it into a different file and use it. And that's exactly what we're going to end up doing in this lesson. To kick things off, we're going to completely empty app.js. I'm going to delete everything we have inside of here, and we're going to start with a very simple, bare bones example to illustrate how all of this works. And then we'll create something more complex using the fs module once again. For the moment, let's go ahead and define our name as a variable. So const name equals, then as a string, your first name. Next up, we're going to go ahead and print it. Nothing groundbreaking here. Console.log, providing the one and only argument, a reference to the name variable. Now, if we run this program, we know exactly what's going to happen. Down below, I'll rerun the script, and what do I get? As expected, I get my message, Andrew, printing to the console. Now let's add a second file into the mix and try to define this variable in that second file. Over inside of the Notes app directory, we have to add a new file into our project. And it's important that you make sure you actually put it in Notes app and it doesn't end up in the root, which is the node course directory. So right here, I'll right click on the Notes app folder. I'll add a new file and we'll call this something generic like utils.js. And let's just say this is a file which contains a few useful utilities for the rest of the application. Now, all we're going to do inside of here for the moment is use console.log to print a little message, and we're going to print the file name, utils.js, so we can figure out exactly when this file runs. Now, if we were to go ahead and run app.js, we would not see that log statement. Down below, we can prove that. I'll rerun the script. I only get my Andrew message. I do not get the message over here. So when we pass a file to node, only that file executes. If we want another file to run, we have to require it for that file to actually get loaded in. We can do just that. Up above, I'm going to add a line at the very top of the file, and here we're going to use require. I'm going to call the require function exactly like we did in the last video when we were loading in the fs module, and we're still going to pass in a single argument, a string. Now, when we're loading in a file that we created in our application, we start with // We have to provide a relative path from the file we're loading it in from, in this case app.js, to the file we're actually trying to load, in this case utils.js. So from app.js, it is // which gets us to the folder for this file. That would be notes-app. From there, we can just go right to the utils.js file, which is located in the same directory. Now, when you're loading in a JavaScript file like this, it is indeed going to execute that file. I'm going to save app.js, and we're going to rerun the program. Down below, I'll rerun our app script, and what do I get? I get utils.js printing first because require happens up here, and that's when utils runs. Then down below, I get Andrew because that's a bit further down the file. But the good news is that I am indeed getting both messages, one from app.js and one from utils.js. So there we go. We now have an application, albeit a simple one, that takes advantage of multiple files. From here, let's go ahead and start to define some variables in that other file that we use in app.js. So as we create complex applications, we'll have all sorts of functions we'll define in other files, and we'll want to use them in our application's main file, which in this case is app.js. So let's see what that looks like. To do this, all I'm going to do is remove the name variable from app.js. So right now, the program would fail because we're trying to reference this variable that doesn't exist. Over in utils.js, we're going to recreate it. So right here, a new const name equals, we're going to pick a value for this. I'll switch things up just to see the different output down below, and I'll stick with Mike as my string for name. Now we're going to save both files and see what happens. So we load in utils.js, which defines that variable. Then we reference the variable down below. Down below in the terminal, I'll use clear to clear the terminal output, and I'll use the up arrow key twice to cycle past the clear command to the node app.js command. We're gonna run it and it's gonna fail. When I do, what do we get? Name is not defined. So this is one very important aspect of the node module system. All of your files, which you can refer to as modules, have their own scope. So app.js has its own scope with its own variables, and utils.js has its own scope with its own variables. App.js cannot access the variables from utils.js, even though it was loaded in with require. So if I can't access name right now, how exactly do I get that done? The answer is that we need to explicitly export all of the stuff this file should share with the outside world. To do this, we take advantage of another aspect of the module system, which down below is module.exports. This is where we can define all of the things this file should share with other files. Now, in our case, it's going to be one thing, a string. Later on, though, it's going to be an object with a bunch of different methods on it, allowing us to export a whole bunch of things. Whatever we assign right here is what gets exported. So all we're going to do is export whatever the value is for name, which we know is the string Mike. So at this point, utils.js is doing its job well. It defined a variable and it exported that variable. Other files can now take advantage of it. Whatever you assign to module.exports, that is available as the return value from when you require the file. So I require utils.js right here, which means the return value is what I assigned, the string Mike, which is stored on this name variable. So over here in app.js, I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to pick a name for our new variable. Name seems appropriate enough. And now our program is back to a working state. Let's go ahead and save app.js and test that out. With all of our files saved down below, I'm going to use clear to clear the terminal output, and I'm going to use the up arrow key twice to rerun the script. And what do I get? I get my utils.js message, which was expected, but I'm also getting Mike, which is fantastic. It's getting printed in this file, but it's getting defined over here. We were able to use module.exports to export it, and we were able to load it in over here with require. Now, once again, just because I picked the name over here doesn't mean I have to use that over here. They are completely independent. I could call this something like first name, a completely different variable name, and that would work just fine as long as I change the references down below too. Right here, I'll change those references. I'll rerun the program, and what do I get? I get the same results. The app is still working. So whatever we assign to module.exports is what other files can get access to. Now let's go ahead and look at a slightly more real-world example where we export a function. The function that we're going to create will be defined in utils.js. It'll be exported from that file. It'll be loaded into this one and called down below. In utils.js, let's go ahead and define it right here. Below our name variable, which we can leave in place, we're going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this one something like add. We're just going to make a simple function that adds up to numbers right here. We will indeed define a function. I'm going to set up two arguments. We can call them X and Y or A and B. Any two names would work. And all we're going to do is return the sum, A plus B. So a very simple function. The point isn't to make interesting functions just yet. The point is to figure out how to share functions across files. Now down below, we can export it. So currently we're exporting name. We're no longer going to do that. Instead, we're going to set module.exports equal to right here, the add function. Now, what do we know? We know that what comes back from require is now this function, which means that over here, the name first name doesn't make much sense anymore, and neither does how we're using it. We need to call it since it's a function. So right here, I'm going to call that add, which is indeed appropriate, though remember, it could be called anything as long as we're consistent in this file. Down below, we can now go ahead and use it. I'm going to create a variable, sum. I'm going to get its value by calling add. I'll pass in 4 and -2. The sum should be 2, and I'll print the sum to the screen. So right here, sum, perfect. Let's go ahead and save all files and see if this works. Down below, I'm going to rerun the script, and what do I get? I get my utils.js method followed by the number 2. So in this case, we exported a function from one file. We then loaded it in with require in a separate file, and we were able to use it, which is a fantastic step in the right direction. Now it's challenge time, and it's going to be up to you to create a new function in a new file and use it in app.js. For the moment, we can go ahead and completely empty this file, or you could choose to leave it around as a reference for the future challenge. If you want to do that, you can just comment out each of the lines. There's a handy keyboard shortcut. It is Command / on Mac and Control / on other operating systems. I could highlight all of the lines here, use that keyboard shortcut to comment them all out, then I could just move them down below, leaving them in place as a reference to remember how things work. Now I'm going to paste in the challenge comments, and we'll talk about what I'd like you to do. So big picture goal, you want to define and use a function in a new file. So step 1, you're going to create a new file called notes.js, and this is a real file we're actually going to use as part of the Notes application. From there, you're going to create a getNotes function, which is also going to be a real function we'll be building out throughout this course. Now, for the moment, it's not going to do anything fancy. It doesn't need any arguments, and it's not going to run any calculations. All it's going to do is return a static string, like your notes ... The notes will eventually come later. Step 3, you want to export the new function from the new file. Step 4, from app.js, you want to make sure you can load in that new function, call it, and print the message to the console. So in the end of the day, app.js should be requiring the new notes file. It should be calling that function to get the message, and it should be using console.log to print that message to the console. When you're done, you should run the program, and the message should print down below. Once again, as these challenges get more complex, it's okay if something's not quite clear or you're not quite sure how to do something. You can always go back to the video in the beginning and figure out exactly what happened. That's not cheating. That's called being resourceful. Actually memorizing things will come with time. All right, let's kick things off. Take a moment to pause the video. When you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? Hopefully that wasn't too much trouble. We're going to go ahead and kick things off right now by creating that new file. Step 1, create a new file called notes.js. I'm going to put that right in the Notes app folder, notes.js, and we need to define a new function that returns the string your notes. The function should be called getNotes. Let's get that done. Const getNotes equals a brand new function. And all that function is going to do is return the string, your notes, ... Later on, it'll do much, much more. Now, step 3 is to make sure that this function actually gets exported. So export the getNotes function. Right now it's defined, but it's not exported, so no other file could take advantage of it. Right here, we're going to fix that. I'm going to use module.exports, which we used in utils.js. I'm going to set it equal to the thing I want to export. In this case, it is the getNotes function. Now, notes.js is all done. Everything else is going to happen in app.js. We have to load in the file, call the function, and print the message. Let's do that right here. I'm going to create a variable const. I'm going to call this get notes. I'm then going to use require to load that file in. Right here, inside of require, we pass in that string. And remember, when we're loading in another file we've created, we have to provide a relative path from the file we're calling require in to the file we're trying to load. So ./notes.js, and now we can actually use the getNotes function. So right here, const message equals, I'll be calling getNotes. I don't have to pass in any arguments since it doesn't take any, then console.log to print the message to the console. Perfect. Let's go ahead and see if this works. Down below, I'm going to go ahead and rerun the script, and what do I get? I get your notes ... printing, which is fantastic. Now that we have this in place, we're making good progress in the right direction, and we can go ahead and remove all of the commented out code in this file, leaving just those 3 lines in place. We're also going to remove the utils.js file that was created for demonstration purposes. The file that you created, notes.js, that's actually going to stay around and play a critical role in the Notes application. So now we know how to load in core node modules. We know how to load in other files we've created. The last thing we need to learn about is how to load in NPM modules so we can take advantage of them in our applications, something we'll be doing extensively throughout the class. We're going to talk about that in the next video. I'm excited to get to it, so let's go ahead and jump right in.